Good evening, everyone. My name is Peggy Mothershed. I am the president of HCC's Political Science Club. I want to welcome everyone here to Hagerstown Community College and the Kepler Theater. So just to start off, I want to start by thanking some random people for their help. Heather was great in pulling everything together. She actually reached out to me and asked how she could help, which was refreshing, so I didn't have to reach out to anyone. And then Ryan Edwards and Jason Berman have been great with getting the Kepler set up and telling me everything I need to do, so I also don't have to worry about that. And then Beth Kirkpatrick and Sarah Jacobs were very instrumental in advertising and getting everything up on the social medias, etc. So I want to thank them for that. And I also want to thank HCC for giving us this space and allowing us to host this forum and stream it online. So if you are interested in submitting any questions, there is a QR code up on the screen and a bit.ly link, so you type that in. Make sure the HCC is capital. But if you don't want to worry about that, then we also have some Political Science Club members that are going to be coming in with index cards and pens if you find that easier. So the way this is going to be structured is they're going to do introductions, and then we have prepared questions, and then they're going to take candidate questions via the link, QR code, and the index cards. So please do that if you want to ask any questions. We will be concluding at 8:30. I know I'm kind of brain dead with this being finals week, and I assume that most of you out there are going to be brain dead by 8:30 too, so we're going to cut this off at 8:30. And I want to introduce Professor Eric Schwartz to go over the rules and introduce the candidates.
Thank you, Peggy. And Peggy has really been taking the lead on organizing all this, so it's really been a fantastic job. The rules are very simple. We have 5 minutes for introductions, 3 minutes for responses to questions. Each candidate is going to get a different prepared question given at random, and you are, as Peggy pointed out, you can submit your questions either through the online form or through the index cards. We are going to start. We're going to go from left to right. We have first, and the candidates will be introducing themselves, providing the reason why they're running. But we have Anthony Williams, Ethan Lowen, Fred Chavez, Linda Murray here tonight. I'd like to thank you all for showing up for this very important event to share your views with the audience and with the public. Yeah, you ready to start? So we'll start with you, Anthony. You have 5 minutes to describe why you're running and who you are.
Sure. So my name is Anthony Williams. I am born and raised here in Washington County. I am a product of the Washington County Public School System, growing up in the Old Forge and Smithsburg Middle and High School districts. Educated here at HCC, also at Shepherd University. So when I say I'm local, I'm local. Going throughout college, majored in biology, minored in education, ended up teaching for my first couple years at an alternative learning facility called Abraxas up in South Mountain, PA, working with juvenile corrections, working with kids who are coming from all over the state of Pennsylvania and West Virginia for the most part, coming to us with large educational gaps because throughout their educational careers didn't really have the support that they deserved. And really from the early on understanding that there were inequities in education from that first couple years of teaching, moving to public schools in Frederick County for several years, and then moving overseas to teach in international schools, really understanding all over the world, we were seeing inequities in educational opportunities, whether it's from lower income, people who are marginalized or just underrepresented. And as we moving back to the States in about 2013, teaching here in Washington County at Williamsport High School, and then moving on to Anacostia High School in DC, really understanding the urban setting here in America and the disparities by zip code that are there. Really weighed heavy on my heart and mind as I got my highly effective bonus from DC Public Schools and used it to start a nonprofit here in Hagerstown when I moved back. If you hear of Beacon House Incorporated, I am the CEO and founder of the organization. We run a full day childcare center and with a preschool and a private K-5 private school at this time. This is our 6th year in operation. And the reason why I do what I do and the reason why I'm running is to make sure that all kids are represented. When we're talking about education, especially public education, is something near and dear to my heart in the aspect that there are a lot of inequities still to this day, depending on where you live, what you look like. All those different things still play into part whether or not you get a good quality education. And we need to make sure that all students, no matter what their zip code, what color their skin are, where they come from, no matter what, that they're getting the proper education and that we start looking at individualizing education for all. We talk about it for special education, but all students need tailored education to where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, and how are we going to make sure through community schools that we're meeting those needs. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. You actually beat the clock on that, so that's a good job. Ethan, could you give us a little 2 cents on why you're running and who you are?
Sure. I'm Ethan Lowen, and I will beat the clock on this one as well, but I just wanted to, I wrote some points down. So one, I want to thank the political club for arranging this event. I mean, these forums are actually incredibly important to an empowered electorate. But my motivation for running as a Board of Education candidate is that I love this community. Even though I did not move here until after my military service was completed in 1999, Washington County has become the home where my family and I have lived a wonderful life, where my children grew up and my friendships are very valued. High level of education that my son and daughter received from our public schools, but also for all children. I also look forward to continuing to build upon our highly successful accelerated and technical programs. It's a true gem that we have. I believe that I bring the most diverse set of experiences of all the candidates. My children went through the Magnet and IB programs in our schools. The International Baccalaureate is what that stands for. Whereas I had a very different public school experience as a child. I attended 5 different school districts in 2 states. I had severe dyslexia and later on behavioral issues. I overcame those challenges over the course of many years, and I now have a life and career that I'm very grateful for, one that I am sure my teachers would not have imagined during those years, but their dedication and persistence is vital to why it's been possible. And that intimate knowledge of overcoming learning disabilities that I was born with, as well as overcoming learning delays caused by behavioral issues, is more important to have represented on the Board of Education now than perhaps at any time in our county's history. Because the learning and behavioral issues that teachers have reported this year is not like anything previously recorded. The way we dealt with this pandemic is not like past generations of Americans have dealt with them. And one of the effects has been that the younger the child, the greater the behavioral issues and learning delays. What this means for a generation of children and the challenges this brings to the school system is hard to overstate. However, we do have examples to help guide us. So for the last 7 years, a number of our nation's largest school districts are in communities that have seen record levels for violent crimes and sexual crimes in the community, and the trauma experienced by those children throughout this period has shown itself in the same types of learning and behavioral issues that the children who have come through the pandemic are now showing. So we have seen what those school systems have done in response, and while the results have been disappointing, with ever lower levels of academic achievement being attained by the students during most years, it gives us a starting point to discuss what does and does not work, and guides us in discussing solutions that are not part of the standard public education system's response. Another area where I can bring a somewhat hard-to-find set of experiences to the Board of Education is that I'm the father of an interracial family, and we have dealt with the issues related to that dynamic. And while I would tell you that being an interracial family is one of the least important characteristics of myself or my family, the reality is that equity and diversity is a major topic of conversation in our culture and our politics. It is also true that interracial families have some different dynamics than same-race relationships. If voters want those experiences to be brought to the legislative process, that is what I bring. In summary, I have a diversified set of experiences that are directly related to the Board of Education. I personally have overcome learning disabilities, behavioral issues. As a result, I have a perspective that can lead to a different approach to what's going to remain our public schools' primary challenge for the next 15 years. I have raised 2 children, guiding them through this county's accelerated programs, giving me a detailed perspective on both the school system's weakest points as well as its most successful. The final point for now is what I bring to the conversation about diversity and inclusion as a personal experience with what life in a post-racial America can be and a path forward to get there. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and I look forward to the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. And Fred Chavez,
Yep.
can you give us a little 2 cents?
Absolutely. First, I am Fred Chavez, running for Board of Education. Happy to be here today. Just so you know, those who have heard me speak before know that I'm very short-winded. I probably would not need all of this 5 minutes. But I wanted to make it known that for me, I wasn't born here in Hagerstown. I've actually only been living here for about 4 years. My background is actually in science, animal science to be specific. I actually thought I was going to be on National Geographic one day, being a veterinarian or something like that. And then my journey led me to the classroom. And while I was in the classroom, I did fall in love with my students. I actually fell in love with my community. And I recognized that there were things that I wanted to get done that I actually could not do as a teacher. It was more to it, more things that I wanted to bring to the table, because I began to see the children as the whole child, not just the piece of the child that you see in the classroom, but the walk that takes them back to their community. You see the whole child, where they're going home to. And when I began to realize that there are so many needs that our kids have that is not really being addressed only as a teacher in the classroom. There's things that we have to touch on, such as policy and different things, and also just making sure that our students are not only getting an inclusive curriculum, but they're also getting help in their communities. You're thinking about low-income communities. You're thinking about communities of color. I am the only black man running for Board of Education, and I say that because I think that that is important out here in Washington County, especially for the kids that do look like me. That's true representation for them to see this black man that is doing this, that is fighting for them, and that is trying to overcome the battle so that they don't have to face that. But it's also important for those who don't look like me to see this diversity and to see this black man doing the same work, because Washington County is very diverse. And rather than just, saying that we acknowledge the diversity, we need to be very much inclusive of it, and we do need to create policy that reflects that diversity in our counties, because outside of Washington County, I promise you, it's a large world, and you're going to see a lot of different people, and we need to prepare our students now for that. And so I'm running for Board of Education because I want to represent every single child. I want to represent the whole child, and I think it's very important to understand the pulse of our communities, to be present, so that the people know exactly who you are, and when that happens, you can represent them well. So thank you for having me today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Fred. Linda, last but not least, could you?
I'd like to thank the Political Science Department of HCC for holding this forum tonight. My name is Linda Murray, and I'm running for re-election to the Board of Education. I'm a graduate of Washington County Public Schools and Hagerstown Community College, and my children and grandchildren are as well. I've been involved in education since my first child entered kindergarten, serving as a homeroom mother, reading tutor, and PTA president. I also served on 2 citizens advisory committees and as a band booster parent. I cooked up a lot of hot dogs, but it got them new band uniforms, so it was worth it. For 26 years, I worked in special education at Salem Avenue Elementary School, retiring in 2016. Salem Avenue Elementary is a high-poverty school, and we had challenges, but we worked hard to make sure all of our students' needs were met. In 2017, I have had the privilege of serving on the Board of Education. I have worked diligently attending board meetings, board committee meetings, one of which I chair, other board and county functions, trainings, and state conferences. I often visit schools to speak with principals and staff to stay current with the needs of our schools. Today, I was at our newest school, Sharpsburg Elementary. The school is absolutely beautiful, and the staff was very welcoming. And so I just would like to say, I want to continue serving on the Board of Education and hope that I can count on your vote for re-election on November 8th.
Thank you, Linda. Just future reference, when we get into answering questions, make sure that you're speaking into the mic, not so much for the audience here, but for this is being live streamed, so to make sure that, just to make sure that everything's caught. So next we'll go on to the questions, prepared questions.
I have to adjust the mic. He's a little bit taller than I am. So the way that we did these is we randomly assigned them seats, and we have 8 prepared questions that either the club came up with or they were sent in from some groups, sent in from some individuals ahead of time. So we are going to give each candidate 3 minutes to cover their given question. And what they do with that 3 minutes is up to them if they want to go back to previous questions, et cetera. We just didn't want to make everyone listen to candidates answer the same question 4 times, because I've been to those forums, and again, just my attention span's gone by the end of that. So, the first question to Anthony: what steps will you take to compensate for and alleviate the effects of COVID on students' educations?
Thank you. That's a very important question. Looking at what the Board of Ed is doing now and the school system is doing now, they're really trying to work with the students in figuring out where their gaps are. That's the first thing you have to do. You have to see where the learning gaps are, identifying those, and then figuring out a plan. I talk about individualizing learning. We need to know where all kids are with their reading and math levels, but then figuring out a targeted intervention plan for each child that meets their needs and throughout the next couple of years. It's not something you can do overnight. The gaps happened over time over the last 2 years. It's something that we'll have to work together with all teachers, but one of the things that I really think we need to focus on is how we can reduce class sizes, especially in early years, but even going up into middle and high school. Class sizes have continued to increase in Washington County, and we know as you get more and more students in a classroom, less individualized attention is being paid to those students. So we really need to tackle how we can find the funding to make sure that we increase the number of staff in the school buildings that can actually help with learning. So those are 2 of the biggest ones, and also one of the biggest things that kids are coming out of COVID and have been dealing with in Washington County are mental health issues. We really need to talk about true community schools that actually have those wraparound supports within the schools. We need to make sure that we have those resources to mental health at their fingertips and for the families as well.
All right, thank you. So the next question to Ethan is: what additional steps will you take to protect students and staff from the COVID-19 pandemic, and what would cause a reassessment of WCPS safety procedures?
Sure. So when it comes to protecting from COVID, we have to follow the science. And so when you talk about the children, what we have is a situation where children are essentially unaffected by COVID. If you look at the statistics, the mortality rate is essentially 0. So what we've done is we created a situation where we took kids and essentially stopped their development for 2 years for a medical issue that's a non-medical issue for them. And I relate it to when my kids were in middle school and the swine flu came through, and the swine flu had a mortality rate of about 80% more than COVID, and we never did anything. We didn't shut down schools. We never discussed shutting down schools. It was a dramatically different experience, and the kids were fine. So we have to keep that in mind as a baseline. Now, as far as when it comes to staff, et cetera, well, then what ends up happening is that we do have to have a more flexible approach. And one of them, of course, is the medical interventions are phenomenal at this point. I don't know that COVID's ever going to come back. When you look at virology, just historically, the statistics, we're now in a more of a statistical norm where we're going to have the variants coming constantly, and that's not going to stop. But historically, when you have a variant on a virus, once there's community and immunity, it really doesn't come back as much of an issue. It really does become more like a flu or a common cold. So that's the most likely scenario. But if it were to happen, then yeah, we're going to take older individuals, and we should allow them to have flexible working schedules, et cetera. Those things should be taken. You follow the science with COVID, is what ends up happening. I am very much opposed to mandatory vaccinations, however, and the reason isn't an ideological thing against vaccines at all. I mean, I'm the most vaccinated person in the room. I've asked for 2 vaccines, weren't even recommended to me, I promise you. But what it is the COVID vaccine, according to the last study that I read that came out of the University of Southern California, is that the COVID vaccine had a mortality rate almost twice that of COVID for children under 18. So there's really serious issues that need to be discussed there, if that's going to be an issue, but I don't think it will be. Now, so mainly when it comes to older individuals, yes, we do have to be flexible with where they work, how they work, and we just have to bend over backwards for that. I do agree with that 100% when it comes to staff. As far as, how much time do I have? Am I almost done? 30 seconds. How much?
30 seconds.
Oh, the one point to go back to what he was talking about with getting the learning gaps. So one thing we do have to face is that there's such a tsunami of issues coming for children. in the next few years, that there aren't enough tutors, there isn't enough money. It's going to have to be community involvement, and not community schools in the sense of all-encompassing, but actually getting parents involved and really bringing them into the educational process and teaching them, making them partners and teaching their children.
All right, yep, thank you. So next question to Fred. What do you view as the main cause behind the hiring issues WCPS is currently experiencing, and what steps will you take to alleviate them?
Okay. I think with hiring, I think people look at leadership. For instance, we always said that we wanted to bring in diverse teachers, but if you don't see diverse leadership, then a lot of times you may feel like you don't have that representation. And I also think with that, I think we're trying too much to outsource when we have a lot of young people that is here right now that can fill these roles if we provide them with the programming to take those steps. For instance, we have high schoolers. If we provide a funnel for them to become teachers, a lot more of them will be willing to do that. And it's the same thing with police officers. If we set up programs like that with our young people, that's your source of filling in some of these gaps. But I think it's also just with, just having that diversity in leadership, because again, Washington County is very diverse, and so is outside of our county. We want to make sure that we have that diversity that is being able to represent those teachers. Teachers want to come in and feel safe. And I have to say, as diverse teachers, as even black teachers, when we come into Washington County, are we necessarily feeling safe here? Are we feeling represented? Do we feel like our voices are being empowered? And if that's not the case, then they don't stick around. And we do not have a lot of black teachers that are here, and we have a lot of black students. So our teacher population is not representative of our student populations out here. And I think that we do need to address that by, making people feel a little bit more safe, not just preaching diversity and using that term loosely, but actually doing things to include them at the table. And that's when you start doing those practices, that's when you start filling the room in with more voices, more people that actually want to be here and be a part of the county. So I think a lot of it just really comes to terms with where we are as a county and what our communities are actually looking like and what we can do to actually bring in more teachers. And like I said, we have a lot of young people, and I think that instead of our young people ending up on the streets or ending up going in full circle doing other things, let's create that avenue for them to become teachers. Those are always the best teachers that we could have.
All right, thank you. And the next question is, what is your opinion on the ongoing calls to remove books from school libraries? And do you anticipate WCPS will have to take action? If so, how would you qualify a book that should be removed from schools?
In Washington County, parents have the right to look at all of the books that are in their students' school's library. And they have the right to say, I don't want my child to read that book. I don't like that material. And so with the electronic checkout system, that book can be flagged, and that student will not get that book. I might not like a book, but somebody else's parent might want them to read it or say it's acceptable for them to read. And so we have a system in place that people preview books and approve them. And I don't think that one parent should tell another parent what their child should read. So I really feel that I'm putting it back on the parent to see what the material is, and then they can decide. If you don't want your child to read that, I perfectly understand. That is your right as a parent. And so you have that book flagged, and those children don't get those books out of the library.
Thank you. So going back to Anthony, as a board member, how will you help build a strong partnership with the new incoming superintendent?
So it's a critical relationship between the board and the superintendent. And so it's at a good time coming in as a board member to a new superintendent. I feel like we would have a good open playing ground to start off fresh, being new as a board member and also as the superintendent. But it's just building the rapport, understanding our goals, and hoping that we both share the vision of Washington County as a place where all students can learn and that we can support all teachers. I wanted to go back to the question that Fred got a little bit about teachers and recruitment, but also retention. I feel like we have a problem in Washington County maybe keeping teachers in certain high quality or high need areas of education like science, special education, speech pathology or speech therapists, things like that. And one of the things we need to do is we need to give them a little bit more sense of support, I feel like teachers in this day and age have become vilified in media by the communities a lot of times, and we really need to all work together. And like Ethan said, getting parents involved in the school system a little bit more, making parents feel welcomed in schools more. I feel like families have become a little bit more alienated as we move to schools that don't represent the community. They have been new schools that have been built. And so we have a lot of disconnect in Washington County with our community. We have new people coming into the community that don't feel welcome. We have people who have been here for generations that don't feel welcomed in their own schools. And so we need to really work on that. And I think all of that together will help with recruitment, will help the superintendent learn the school system if we're out there walking the streets, moving meetings to schools, and actually in each district having school board meetings throughout the year instead of just being at central office, which kind of feels not very welcoming to parents and families because it's very off-putting sometimes. Moving them out to the community, making it Washington County really community-focused and community-oriented from the top down.
Thank you. So the next question to Ethan, are you satisfied with the budget allocations that the county commissioners have approved in the past? If not, where in the school budget is the need greatest?
So the answer on one level, I'm actually going to say yes. And one reason I'm going to say it is just to let you know that I'm not going to say things just because it's what I think you guys want to hear. That's not how I speak. So, but what I mean by that is that the basic needs of education have all been being met. The class size is actually still relatively low. Obviously, that's going to change in the future if the budget continues to go up at less than the rate of inflation, and it's gone up significantly less than that this year. But there are a couple issues that to keep in mind when it comes to the budget with the county commissioners. One is it is their largest. 43% of their budget already goes to the county schools. They're already behind many years on just roads. The deficit for paramedics in this county is at a critical mortal level. So there's other issues that they have to balance. Now, on top of that, with the Board of Education, is that there is a lot of waste, actually. I don't know that it's not. I don't believe it's as much as what many government agencies do. It's probably on the lower end, but there is probably a good 5% of the budget that could be removed. Another issue is that when you listen to what parents talk about, they're not talking about things that require expenses. They're not asking for things that require more money to be spent. And so if the parents aren't asking for more money to be spent, then what is the justification for more money from the county commissioners? That would be that. So I guess the answer is yes. I'm going to say yes. I am happy with it. I know it needs to adjust over time, but for right now, it's okay. The Board of Ed needs to concentrate on the issues of parents that are not actually money issues. How much time do I have left? A minute. I do want to say something in regards to the library books as well, because it's become an almost comical issue to see some of the individuals' responses, because I am familiar with that. I just heard it described in the newspaper as book burning, you know. But that's not what it is. These books are very specific. I believe the list is up to about 50 that parents in the county have found. And what these books are is and there's a child up there, so I will limit the detail. But these books are as pornographic as you can possibly get in a glorifying manner, right? Cartoon drawings, as graphic as you can get in a glorifying manner. One of the books that is in the libraries shows the beginnings of a child in a ball shaking at the beginning of a rape. So we're not talking about like, oh, library books, you know, we don't like the fact that they're talking about some subject. That's not what we're talking about at all. So it is damaging, actually. Many people would say it's damaging for adult minds to view the images and the discussions. So there's no doubt it's damaging for children. That's what the issue is, the library books. And we do need to make moral decisions as politicians. Thank you.
So the next question to Fred, what are your opinions on student member of the board voting rights? Should the Washington County SMOB have full voting rights?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. That was actually something that we had talked about as a team. Even with talking with the community, I've been pushing for more, push for students to have a little bit more voice. Certain matters, perhaps they may not be able to vote on, but I think that our students do have a lot to say. And I think it's important to be able to understand where they're coming from. I think it's also important to allow the students to kind of tell you where they're, what the environment of their classroom is like and what they're hoping for. And so if you are going to have student representation on the board, perhaps consider allowing the kids to have that voice to be able to vote on certain matters that especially affect them. And I think right now where this county seems to be like a censorship kind of thing, where it's just like cutting off people's voices or dictating what kids can do. And I think that's a problem. Like even when we're talking about the books, for instance, a lot of this discussion came up when you started talking about diversity and having a curriculum that was inclusive of that diversity. Then all of a sudden now we started talking about, well, we don't want these books in our classrooms and different things. And I think it's dangerous when we start leaning towards that, because then it starts becoming effects on our curriculum where we're not teaching history, true history. We're now censoring it because we don't want to talk about certain things because it may be hard to hear. But there are certain communities, there are certain people that have gone through trauma, and these things we have to talk about, we have to teach them, we have to equip our students. And so we don't really want to start trying to censorship. And a lot of these kids, we're talking about we don't want them to read books, but yet they have TikTok, they got Snapchat, they have Instagram. So they're probably being exposed to a lot more, honestly. So I think, it's important to be inclusive with your curriculum and, and actually teaching history the way history actually is and not trying to make it, add sugar to the water and everything. But yeah, I'm sorry, can you ask the question again too? Because I got a little sidetracked there.
WCPS is currently that's the next one. What are your opinions on student member of the board voting rights? Should the Washington County SMOB have full voting
and
rights?
like I said, I do think that you should include those voices and allow them to be able to vote on these matters because the kids, I promise you, they're very much aware of what is going on, and their voice is important. Just important. Allow the students to be able to have that voice as well and that say. That makes for a better community that you're considering it rather than just cutting them off.
All right, thank you. And the last of the prepared questions, WCPS is currently experiencing a crisis with behaviors and mental health in students. How will you ensure that we continue to address these challenges?
That's a very good question. That's not only facing Washington County Public Schools, that's a nationwide problem. And during COVID, we had a lot of kids that didn't come to school. We have a lot of kids, I'd say 20% that haven't come back. Or if they've come back, they come a day or two and then they don't come back for a while. That's damaging. We don't know what's going on at home. We don't know whether somebody is just not paying attention to them or somebody's off at work leaving them alone, but it's very detrimental to them. And when we do get them back in school, they just have a real hard problem trying to get back into the routine. One of the things that we had proposed or have proposed in our FY23 budget is to put a guidance counselor in every elementary school, which means money from the county commissioners. We've tried to tell them the importance of this and explain to them what's going on in the schools. Whether they'll listen or not, that remains to be seen. But that is a big problem and it needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. So that wraps up the prepared questions. We are going to move on to audience questions. If you have questions on the cards that we handed out earlier, there are some political science club members that will collect those if you hold them up. And we also have the form up there to submit questions, QR code and the bit.ly link. Again, capital HCC, and Professor Schwartz will take over from here. We'll switch jobs.
So we already have some questions that have been sent in. So I imagine some of you are already preparing some questions. So I've seen some of you writing. You're timing things? Okay. So we have. We'll do the same from going down the same order that we were. What procedures are in place to analyze redundancies to remove waste from the budget? Are there online portals for taxpayers to request specific information regarding asset allocations and justifications for those allocations? So I guess the question really is, do you think there should be online portals for this? I guess yeah.
So we know that the public school budget is public knowledge, and so the public school budget is out there, and you can find the information of where items are line item for in the budget. But the question asking for, I guess, more transparency probably is what they're asking for, and that's something that I think maybe we could have a little bit more in board meetings and talking about the budget, what those line items actually represent, I think are more confusing to individuals in the general public that haven't been in education. So that would be a good way to have some budget meetings that actually explain. And like I stated before, having those meetings throughout the county, not making people come to the Board of Ed, but having those meetings about budget out and about in the county so people have more access and really explaining what those line items are. Running a nonprofit, you have line items too that not everyone understands when you look at our 990, what all those items are. Because you have general things like supplies and things like that that aren't broken down always into those nitty gritty, where is the money going? And I think that's what the general public wants to know a little bit more. Where are the tax dollars going? What is it being used for? And I think we need more transparency with that.
Okay, great, thank you, thank you. Next question is for you, Ethan. How would you address parents who are concerned about aspects of comprehensive sex ed curriculum that go against their deeply held religious beliefs?
Sure. That, of course, is something we've touched on a little bit this evening. So you know, we've been doing sex ed in America for decades, and it's worked very well. And for parents that want to withhold their children from the curriculum, then they can, and that's very few, right? So we've been doing it right for a long time. The curriculum we're talking about now, I would almost say, is not sex ed. What it really is it's about a lifestyle. It's talking about a lifestyle. So there is called the 3 R's curriculum is the new one, which essentially is what's being discussed tonight, is what was done for a week in the schools. The 3 R curriculum is it teaches a way to view the world, okay? And now it talks about gender identity, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, at a very young age, and what is the point of that? But like one of the videos that it has actually has a young child chastising another child's parents. You know, there's something very harmful about that, right? Why is that? That wasn't put in by accident. You know, there's another aspect. One of the line items in that curriculum, not for the 6th grade but the 7th grade, is that it talks about it talks about relations between races and how it needs to be taught. Well, that is like the most racist thing, right? Up until I read that, the most racist thing I'd ever heard about my marriage was a woman in Frederick who made the statement after us talking at a McDonald's. She said to my wife, "Wow, you speak English really well." Well, that's a whole nother level. What? You need to have a class on that? That needs to be part of a curriculum? Absolutely not. It's not teaching material. It's not teaching facts. It's teaching a worldview, and it's teaching a lifestyle. And that's what the issue is. And we could go on and on about that. So it's very inappropriate. There's no room for that in the public schools at all. But obviously, at a minimum, parents should be able to pull their kids from that if they don't want that. And my advice would be every parent should pull, because I don't want any child being told that about my marriage. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. I do want to reiterate that, as I said, for those in the audience, that if you have a question, you can raise your hand and with a slip of paper, and someone will come pick up that question. And if you want to address it to a particular candidate, please, write that on the question, so you have that option. Let's see. Next, for Fred, what is the difference between teaching a child what to think and teaching them how to think? What are the advantages and disadvantages of each? What teaching methods or curricula lend to each?
Okay, I think that's a great question. First off, I'm going to actually say something kind of funny when we're talking about education. I think it's important for people to unlearn things, actually, because I think a lot of times ideology and beliefs and maybe perhaps tradition get passed down and then it's presented as fact, in which case now I don't think that this should be taught in the school because this is how I was raised and this is what I believe. And so I think it's important because even as a teacher, there may be things that we may be uncomfortable with, but we still have to teach it. What we think as a teacher does not matter. We have to present the facts and allow our kids to be able to make those decisions, come to those conclusions on their own based on the fact and not based off of opinion. And I think that's the issue that we have with curriculum is, well, I don't go through this or I can't empathize with this situation and I don't think that this should be taught. We have a diverse classroom, and there are kids that are going through certain experiences, and we cannot just dismiss that because we think that it shouldn't be taught. And I think that, I feel like this kind of gets into the scope of like critical race theory and, different things like that. That has nothing to do with K through 12. And honestly, that shouldn't even be a discussion that we should really even be having. But as far as curriculum, when we're talking about history and we're talking about science, we need to be inclusive. As a science teacher, I taught a lesson on Flint, Michigan. I even taught a lesson on knowing the health of your community based on your zip code. And that is a fact, that you actually can know the health of your community based on the zip code, based on different factors. And these are things that they have to learn because at the root of it, you're going to learn some different things that is affecting certain students in that classroom. And so for me, I present the facts. And I think that as a teacher, that's what you have to do is present the facts and allow the kids to be able to think for themselves. If you're not presenting the facts and it is based on opinion, that's where you start seeing issues. And it makes for a good discussion because if you are creating that environment in your classroom that is inclusive and that your students do feel safe, no matter what they believe in, they're going to feel safe to have that discussion, even if it's an opposing argument or even if it's something that they don't believe in. We teach our kids to present the facts just as we do. And so sometimes you meet your match, with some of the young people that they're ready. And I think that's important is because you want to have those discussions. Again, this is about preparing our kids for an interdependent world. This is about making them leaders to be able to face the diversity that is out there. So yes, present the facts and let the kids come to the conclusions on their own, but unlearn some things, Washington County, unlearn some things.
Thank you, Fred. Next, for Linda, how do you plan to attract and maintain the employment for more teachers who reflect the communities they serve?
Our Human Resources Department does a very good job of trying to attract and retain all types of teachers and staff. They go to different colleges. They go to, they put billboards up in different areas. They put it out in different websites, and they're constantly working to get a diverse group of applicants so that we can have that good, diverse workforce at Washington County Public Schools. But when you've got Frederick County, you've got Montgomery County, you've got Baltimore County, you've got Harford County, their county commissioners are giving them millions of dollars, millions. And they're getting big salaries. How can we compete with that? We're a great school system. But we would love to have them come work for us. But we can't pay them what those other counties can pay them. So how do we attract them? Pay them more money. How do we pay them more money? We get more money from the county commissioners. It's a vicious circle. And I hate to keep saying that, but that's what it is. Basically, it comes down to that. We're trying to keep the teachers that we have. We're trying, like I said, there's a great teacher shortage. We're losing teachers. We're losing administrators. We've lost many this year. They're going to other counties. So I think it comes down, we try to do things to, with the benefits and some of the things we've put in, the half days to give them a little more time. We're trying to work with them. But as far as salaries go, that's where it's going to be difficult. And we need to retain these good teachers. We don't want to lose them, not one of them, or the administrators, or the ESP staff. So that's my bottom line, the money.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Fairly simple question for Anthony here. Do you think more trade skills are needed in the instruction?
That would be a yes. We need more and more opportunities for all students to go out of high school with some type of skill, whether it's they're going on to college with their college prep or they're going on to work right after school. We need kids prepared right day one when they graduate. They should be able to walk out of a WCPS school and having the opportunity to, not just kids that go to Washington County Tech, but at the home schools, there should be more programming that actually gets the trade skills out to kids and get more opportunity to kids at the home school. So that's a yes. I want to touch on the topic of sex education and the whole idea of what Fred was saying, that we need to unlearn things. As an openly gay man in Washington County, growing up in Washington County public schools, talking about gender identity, sexual orientation is not sex education. It's about inclusion. It's about all kids feeling welcomed as who they are, and knowing that in those buildings, who they are is not something to be ashamed of. And when we talk about sex education, it's not talking about the actual mechanics of sex. It's talking about gender identity, sexual orientation, which are things that we need to talk about more openly in Washington County. As a member of the LGBTQ community working in Washington County public schools, knowing that we're not doing enough and we haven't done enough to make sure all students feel safe. And when you talk about lifestyle, I didn't choose to be gay. Lifestyle is not what we call that, and that is a very closed-minded term to use. Lifestyle is my choice to live in the country, live going outdoors and doing things like that. That's the lifestyle. My sexual orientation, and the kids in Washington County public schools that identify as anywhere on that spectrum, that's not a lifestyle. So I want to make sure that's clear. And another thing about the idea of teachers, it's not the pay. We have one of the highest start pay rates in the area. It's respect. It's about giving them classroom autonomy a little bit, to feel respected a little bit more, and we need to do a little bit more and better for that, for teachers, to keep them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Anthony. We have another question. It's about parental voice for Ethan. What is your position on the growing controversy concerning parental voice with specific reference to the development of curricula?
Sure. Well, parents, of course, are the core of society, and so obviously their voice is the most important voice when it comes to curriculum. So, I mean, they can be involved in any aspect of it that they want. Now, so I guess if I knew more specifically what the person was asking, I guess I'd have a more specific response. What I would say about curriculum as it relates to both what Fred was saying about history and what Anthony was saying about sex ed, as far as not sex ed, but in, diversity and inclusion. What we're talking about here is we're not really talking about education. We're leaving the educational process. And what we're talking about is trying to get kids to think of things a certain way. And you know what? I even agree with a lot of it. But that is not the role of the government or the public schools, to try to get people to think a certain way. And so, just using Fred's example, I'm going to assume that when Fred is talking about history, he's referring to slavery and the intensity of it, right? The evil of slavery. Now, when I was a child going through school, I learned all sorts of things. I saw pictures of a slave with his back shredded, and all sorts of terrible things. We learned about slavery. So are we talking about learning about slavery when we're talking about history the way that Fred is referring to it? Or are we trying to get an emotional reaction from the children, right? So when we talk about sex ed and the different and being the different types of lifestyles, et cetera, are we talking about sex ed, or are we talking about lifestyles and trying to get children to have a certain view on lifestyles? And so the issue is that government, that is not the role of government to do, right? It's not the job of the schools to say, well, we got your kids for 6.5 hours, and so we're going to tell them how to view certain facts. The job of the school is to teach facts, and it is the job of the family to teach the interpretation of those facts. It's not our job to get children to view and feel a certain way about facts. They don't need that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. We have a number of questions coming in now that are being sent in, not just from the audience here. One of them is a factual thing, just a clarification. So we have 3 open seats for people to vote that are currently open, so just for clarification, factual thing here. I guess the next one goes to Fred here. Excuse me. This is a thing with mechanical things. To summarize it, do we pay teachers enough? Do we pay teachers enough for the work that they do? And that goes to Fred right now. It's for all the candidates, but you know, we're
Yeah, I would, like I said, I would say our salary is pretty good here for Washington County. And like I said, there's other resources that we can definitely provide, you know, to support the teachers in the classroom to keep them there. But I think that's kind of the short answer. I'm actually go back to what Ethan said earlier in regards to curriculum and different things. First, as you all can see, I am a black man sitting here, and I think that it's probably not a good look that when an assumption is made on the history that I am referring to, that it automatically goes to slavery. That's a problem. And I think that when we talk about history, when we talk about African Americans, we talk about the different things that we're seeing in our community, it always seems to go to slavery. And I have to say that our history did not start out as slaves. We were doctors, kings, queens, princes before we was brought over here as enslaved people. And history is history. You can't decide what part of history you're going to teach, or we're going to take this out, or, you know, nobody said anything about emotional effects or anything like that. We said we state the facts because that's what you do as an educator. You teach what that curriculum is. You teach the facts. And history is history. And so, no, that the whole scope of what I was talking about for history certainly was a lot more than slavery. But as a teacher and even as a person that represents our education system, you do have to be mindful and inclusive that some of the students that you have, some of the teachers that you have, some of the staff that you have are experiencing life a lot differently based on that history. And so you have to understand that. You can't just say that, you know, we don't want to teach this because this is emotional or anything like that. No, history is history, and we have to teach that. We have to teach history for what history actually is. So I just hope that that kind of clarifies things. I just felt compelled to speak on that.
Thank you, Fred. This is for Linda, actually very appropriate. What is the most shift it down? What is the most important issue that you have on which you've changed your mind in your tenure there?
I think the most important issue in which I've changed my mind, it was closing Hancock and Cascade schools. On paper, it looked like something we should do. Hancock is 40% at 40% capacity, and that's with middle and high school. Cascade is, most of the school is closed down. They're not even using most of the school. And so to keep those buildings open cost a lot more to educate those children than it does to educate all the others in Washington County. So on paper, it made sense. But then I went and visited the schools, I talked to the parents, and I listened when we had our hearing. And I listened to the families, and I listened to how they didn't want their community separated. And so it may have looked good on paper, and it may be coming back sometime in the future, but for right now, I felt that the right decision was to keep those schools open.
Thank you. So we're going to do one more round of questions, and then we're going to give everyone some time for closing remarks, 3 minutes as well. So back to Anthony. What procedures are in place to, new questions keep bumping me up to the top. If you were currently on the board, how would you address the learning gaps that students who will be leaving WCPS suffer as they enter into society?
So I think one of the things is we have to look at high school as not an end, but that the school system is actually a place that students can come back for resources. I think that's one thing we're starting to understand about community, that at the age of 18 or 21, whenever they age out of the school system, kids aren't always ready, or maybe they thought that it wanted to do something and they come back home from whatever they do and they want to change fields. Well, the school system should be there to help them through grants or through community partnerships. There's a lot of organizations like HCC that partner with WCPS, building some type of safety net as they come back. I know Goodwill here in Washington County is really working with the population of 16 to 24 that we call sometimes disconnected youth that don't have a place in society. They don't know where they're going. They don't know what they want to do yet. We need to do more to support those youth. And we have a lot of youth in that age group that are homeless, that don't have family or resources. So we need to start building more resources for that age group, that they can go out and explore, figure out maybe they don't like that trade, or that they went to college and they're not really suited for it, that they want to come back and figure out some other things. So we need to really start looking at that. And I think On Track of Washington County is another nonprofit that's really looking at, from birth to career, how do we support individuals in the community. It's made up of lots of other nonprofits and business community members and different individuals in the community working together to tackle this. I think we need to spend more time figuring out a plan, looking at ways to fund it, and making sure that all kids, even after they age out, have the support.
Thank you. So the next question, what can be done to turn schools in the district into more trauma-informed learning environments?
Trauma-informed learning environment. Okay, so in other words, with children that have come back out of COVID and have the behavioral issues, the emotional effects. So, yeah, that's a great question, because that's actually, I think, is going to be the most important issue of the school system for the next 15 years, essentially. And so what it takes is, and just going through what worked for myself and different children that were in special ed with me, I ended up doing 2 stints in special ed during my public school days. You need a few different things. One is you do need some more individualized learning. Okay, so there is that. Smaller classroom sizes, very important. You do need access to some specialists, such as tutors for many instances. But one of the biggest things is you need orderliness. You need order. You need, so you think order, discipline, however you want to word it. The teacher needs to be in control of the classroom. One way I'd say to think about it is what's going on in the heads of these children in a lot of ways is, think of it as a loud noise. It's a very, very loud noise, and it's blocking out a lot of other things, a lot of inputs, a lot of thoughts that would otherwise go through. And what needs to happen over time, and for many kids it's not going to happen during their public school career, the noise level needs to come down. It needs to come down so they can hear the other inputs and even hear their own thoughts. And so what is the environment that creates that? That creates a lessening of the noise. Think whether you want to use the word self-control, peace, patience, right? There's different words you can use for it, same concept. And so a lot of it boils down to orderliness. A lot of it boils down to going a little bit slower, which gets to the uniqueness of specialized, individualized education. But that's really the ultimate goal. Is that, but it does boil down to orderliness, and the fact that the teacher does need to be in control of the classroom, and that's a major, major issue in the current public school environment. So that's what I would say for that.
All right. Thank you. So Fred, with yearly flat funding of the Board of Education's general fund budget, cuts are inevitable. Where do you think cuts should be made?
Okay, can I actually go back to the trauma question, if that's okay? Because I think when we're talking about addressing trauma, that's the complete opposite of discipline. And I say that because you want to allow you don't want to punish them for what they're going through. You need to be a voice for them. And sometimes the loudest kid in the room is one that needs actually the most help. They need more resources. And so sometimes it just helps just to take a kid out of the room and just talk to them one-on-one and just say what's going on. You'd be surprised the power that comes with just that simple question. But I think a lot of times, a lot of kids are being punished for the mental issues that they're going through, for the trauma that they're going through, and that's leading to like the school to prison pipeline, because that's what you start seeing is you're trying to set these kids up for what order and punishment looks like. And these kids do need a voice, and I'm sorry, I think that's so important for us to talk about, because, you know, I always say be who you needed when you were younger. Man, that's what I needed when I was coming up, was a teacher that would actually listen to me, because I'm crying out and I'm telling you that I need help. And a lot of times kids don't know what other way to do that, and so they act out. And so the opposite, you know, you don't want to discipline that, you want to listen. And that's where other resources in the school can come from. You know, it's those that are able to address that, those that are able to work with the teachers in their classroom to create that environment, to create that culture that helps. And that's why you do see a lot of teachers that are able to handle all of the, as they call them, the fireballs in the classroom, and they're fine being there. It's because that teacher has created that environment, and they've allowed their students to have a voice, and that these kids know that this teacher actually cares about them. So there's a time and place for discipline, but not when it comes to trauma.
All right, thank you. And then as a candidate for county commissioner, I'm curious of how you view the importance of having joint meetings between the Board of Education and the Board of County Commissioners to work collectively in regards to finding solutions to the problems and to directly have an understanding of what funding is needed.
Is that for me?
Yep.
Our board president and our board vice president meet with each county commissioner during the budget process and at other times during the years too, and try to have a dialogue. It's very difficult to have a dialogue because you don't get any answers. I don't know how we could try to work together. We've reached out to them several times, and this sounds like I'm whining, and I'm sorry, but in my 5 years on the board, I have not seen a cohesive board of commissioners and board of Washington County Board of Education group really have a good work session. They come, we talk, they leave. We go to them, we talk, they say goodbye. The last time our president was talking and she was just cut off. So I don't know what the answer is. Maybe some new commissioners that are willing to listen. I mean, and I know that sounds terrible, but it's the truth.
I think we have 3 candidates with us here tonight, so 3 other county commissioner candidates, so yeah, thank you. So I'm going to give everyone 3 minutes for any closing thoughts, and then afterwards there are light refreshments out there, and the student art show is out there. Definitely take a look at that. There's some art on the main floor, and then up on the second floor, some really talented students, but 3 minutes for closing responses.
Sure. Again, my name is Anthony Williams, running for school board. Really, tonight, I want you to take away the comments of what do you want Washington County to become? Do you want Washington County to still go at the status quo, or do you want Washington County to evolve into a community where all members of the community are welcomed in schools, have a voice, but also we look out for every individual and we don't leave anyone behind? We can't have that mindset where we keep trying to rewrite history to reflect only certain people We have to be inclusive of all people, and we cannot deny their voices as we move forward. We want community schools, and we're talking about true community schools that have support for everyone with mental health and other services. We want individualized learning where all students have success, not just a few. And we want smaller class sizes that teachers feel supported in. And those are things that are going to take a lot of work. But if you know anything about my background, for the last 6 years, I haven't given up on a dream. My dream was to start a nonprofit. Before that, it was the school that I had just opened up in the fall that is a place for all kids, no matter what their abilities are. We work with them. We work with the families. We provide services. We go out in the community and find resources that they need. That's what we need in Washington County for our students and for our staff. And we need a better Washington County. And so if you want to be part of the change, vote for me in November. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your attention this evening. And this was a great conversation. I mean, I'd love to continue talking to all these guys. Very important issues and great perspective. So obviously answering everything can't happen in 3 minutes. What I would say is that all the things that we're talking about tonight, the way that we're talking about the inclusion and that type of teaching and how to deal with children when it comes to the tutors and the trauma and et cetera, we actually have already seen that happen for years and years in many, many places around the country, right? It's happening in Baltimore locally, right? That's where they've been doing these things for years. So we see the effects of years of this. So we can say and make it sound however we want to make it sound, but it's been happening for years. And the effects have been the same everywhere that it's been tried. Education drops. Educational performance, academic performance drops, right? The number of kids that are going on to be engineers drops, right? So we actually have seen the effects of it. So I guess I would say that when you think about what it is that you want, right? You as the voter want, because you as the voter, that's what you're going to get. What I'd say is one thing about what it is we've said that makes the most sense and rings the most true to you. But also keep in mind that we've seen what a lot of the proponents on this table have said tonight. We've seen that already happening for years in many school districts. They're largest, and school districts spend the most money in the entire country. And it's had the same results everywhere. Lower academic performance and behavioral issues that have increased, so it hasn't resolved the behavioral issues. Maybe it's even made it worse, I don't know. But it hasn't resolved them. But one thing that's happened is educational performance has dropped. So keep that in mind as well. But thank you for your time, and I hope to speak to all of you after this.
Thank you. Fred?
So again, I'm Fred Chavis. And again, I'm running for Board of Education because I want to be that voice for our community out here. And I know that's so like cliche to say, but it's the truth. It's that representation that matters. I want our students to have an equitable education, but I also recognize the fact that education is not just in our classroom. Education actually stretches out to our communities. It stretches out a lot farther than what's going on in our schools. And so I want our schools to be able to tap into the amazing resources that we have outside of it to ensure that we're addressing the entire child. We have students that are living in low-income areas. We have different things that are going on that our schools can actually help with. That's actually a form of violence intervention. It's providing our young people with everything that they need. That's why I want to be on the Board of Education, is because this isn't just a stepping stone or a political stepping stone for me. In fact, I feel like we just really need to stop politicizing education altogether and really just invest in it and provide our young people with all the resources that they absolutely need so that we can stop punishing them when they are out here trying to survive. And so I want to be that voice on this board. I want to work with the current members that are on there. I want to build relationships with some of the county commissioners. I actually didn't mean to say some of the county commissioners. I want to build relationships with all of them in general. But it takes all of us to get this done. And so I am hopeful that we can definitely get what we need for our staff, what we need for our educators, what we need for our families, and for our children. And so again, I'm Fred Chavis, running for Board of Education. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Lastly?
Well, I want to thank, again, the HCC Political Science Department, and I want to thank you, Tony, Ethan, and Fred, for being here tonight. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. In my 5 years serving on the Board of Education, I have been committed to my position and done my best to demonstrate a strong work ethic and passion for education. I pride myself on having excellent attendance for meetings, work sessions, and workshops, along with being prepared to do the work expected of me. As I stated earlier, I frequently visit schools and attend functions to keep in touch with what is going on in our schools, in our community. COVID-19 has created many challenges for our school system. Student attendance is suffering, and we need to strongly encourage the county commissioners to fund more counselors and other staff to help with the COVID-19 recovery. I would like to continue serving on the board in order to help with this much-needed recovery. I encourage people to reach out to me and share their thoughts and concerns. With your support, I will continue to do my best for all of the stakeholders of Washington County Public Schools. And so I ask you to please vote to re-elect me, Linda Murray, to the Board of Education on November 8th. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I want to thank the candidates, some of the current board members, and community members for coming out tonight, both in person and watching the stream. Also, again, I want to thank HCC for allowing us to host this here. I think this is a very important discussion, and it's great that we had 4 out of the 6 candidates come, honestly. I was very happy with that. So again, light refreshments out there, the student art show. Make sure you look around, 1st and 2nd floor, and I hope to see you guys at the polls.